show begins in 5 minutes. This is intermission time, refreshment time. Visit our snack stand for hot dogs and other sandwiches, for ice-cold Coca-Cola, for a variety of ice cream, candy bars, cigarettes. We are here to serve you. You still have 4 minutes before the next show. Why not take a break, have a stretch, and visit our modern refreshment center? You'll find clean, conveniently located restrooms for your comfort. Better hurry. Next show starts in 3 minutes. But there's still plenty of time to go to the handy snack stand for a sizzling hot dog and a refreshing Coke, or for any of the many tempting items available there. Two minutes until the next show starts. The Refreshment Center has plenty of freshly popped, hot buttered popcorn and lots of other good things waiting for you. Drop over now.
For your convenience, our refreshment center will remain open when the next show begins in just a minute. You'll find a wide selection of tasty snacks and beverages available for your pleasure. Sizzling, steaming, griddle-fresh hot dogs in fluffy buns with your choice of seasoning. A large selection of appetizing sandwiches. Delicious, refreshing, ice-cold Coca-Cola. A kettle full of hot buttered popcorn, light and crisp, golden good to the taste. Fresh frozen ice cream and lots of other tasty items. Also, you'll find we carry your favorite brand of cigarettes. Make yourself at home. Enjoy the service of our refreshment center whenever you come to see us. Now, on with the show.
Well, hello there, and welcome to a Sunday night experiment in doing the live stream here. Um, got a couple people here. Used to love drive-ins. Milton Bradley says, boy says, hi, haven't been to a drive-in in years. There hasn't been a drive-in in my area in years. They kind of made like a weird little comeback during COVID there when people weren't allowed to, get near each other. But that's sort of gone by the wayside again. So, because people don't really want to just like sit in their cars as like a novelty to eat or watch movies or whatever. But you go, Richard. Uh, Richard Tracy um, says, anyone remember double features? Yeah, nobody got time for double features anymore. Well, I mean that's the sort of that last gasp there, the holdout from the old age of movies, right? Where you paid your nickel or your dime and you spent all day in the movie theater watching cartoons and newsreels and the A movie and the B movie and over and over again on the whole cycle, but became the double feature there at the drive-in and became the movie theater, which is now trying to keep anybody in there since everybody can just watch it on streaming or whatever later. Um, God bless them. Good luck. I guess now the big aspiration for movies is to become a meme, right? If you become a meme like Barbenheimer, then you actually get people to see your movie. But well, welcome, as I was saying, for this Sunday night experiment, seeing what seeing who shows up and if we have a good time here tonight, like we usually do on Thursday nights, is usually when we've been doing these. But put out the poll, and most people said Sunday night actually. So we'll see who actually follows through with popping in here tonight. Um, this might not be a long live stream though. Like we've been starting to get close to 3 hours. But probably not going to be that long because tomorrow my wife and I were actually heading off to Glacier National Park in Montana for a little vacation, which is just driving distance from us, but it's still a getaway. So we got to pack still for that. So it might not be too long tonight. Don't want to go into the wee hours here with that, but we'll try and have a good time here. Richard says, drive-ins don't make sense today. You spend on both gas and ticket price. Yeah. um, yeah, I mean, today there are still active drive-ins. I know there's because I'm interested in Route 66 and someday I want to drive that. And I know there are still several active drive-in movie theaters along it, and I think one even that is being rebuilt and restored. So, but I mean, Route 66, you have the benefit there where, like, part of the appeal is the car culture of it. So, sure, people want to enjoy the drive in as part of the car culture experience of Route 66. Um, Around where I live, yeah, no, there's no drive ins. And I can't imagine people wanting to sit in their cars. I would not want to sit in my car for like 3 hours or whatever a movie is today. Um, no way. I'd want to get out and stretch and whatever. So, eh. Um, I guess it all depends. Did I like Barbie? Richard Tracy also asks. I have not seen it. Um, I was interested in seeing it. It looked visually interesting, and then I started to see the reviews come in, and it was just like, I get the seems like a bit of a Rorschach test, like of what you get out of it. Is it this like totally arch feminist film, or is it like this weird, like unintentionally anti-feminist film, or whatever? I don't know, and I'm not gonna bother seeing it because my attitude with more and more current movies, as I've expressed before on the live stream and stuff, is that it's just not worth the time. I don't care anymore. Modern Hollywood, unless something really is speaking out to me, like I might go see Dune. I saw Dune 1, so I might go see Dune 2, just, see the whole story. Um, and Denis Villeneuve is a good director, so, sure. Very visually arresting. But like for the most part, it's just like, why do I need that negativity? Um, it's most modern Hollywood is garbage. So I'm just gonna stick with like the old stuff that I like. So there we go. I'd rather spend the time and curl up with an old classic that I like than waste the money to go watch some modern movie that I know I'm pretty much not going to. Hi, Martin. Hi, Queen. Welcome back. Kaiser Soze is here, so the usual Thursday gang is getting back together here on a Sunday. That's good to see. And I think a few other people that don't usually show up for the live stream, so I'm glad you were able to make it this time around. I'm just going to have a look here and see who all is actually here. Participant list. Okay, so yeah, we're doing good. Like the original Dune instead of the new one. Yeah, well, I mean, David Lynch, right? So, it has much to recommend it. I thought actually the new one was not bad. It wasn't like the worst thing I've ever seen, which is saying a lot nowadays in Hollywood, where it does seem like increasingly they are the worst thing I've ever seen. So I didn't hate Dune, so the new one. So Dune 2, sure. I'll give that I'll give that at least to finish off the story. I'll see that. Although I do know what is supposed to happen in subsequent movies. We'll see if they ever bother getting around to that or not. I can't imagine painting the Glorious Revolutionary as the beginning of a 1,000-year Reich led by some monster, literal monster creature, would fit so well in modern politics. So we'll first Dune had an actual ending. Yeah, well, I mean, this Dune was just part 1, right? So it's supposed to be part 2, and who knows, maybe part 3. Depends how much they split up the book. But yeah. But tonight, what we're supposed to be talking about here, tonight's subject matter is Atomic Age Victorian Sci-Fi, which is a little low-key, well, not even low-key, interest area of mine, because I have, for a million years, run actually a blog on Victorian science fiction. Yes, Karel Zeman is up there. So this is going into the deep lore now. I was actually one of the first people to have a steampunk website way back in the day, 1997. It's roughly when I started it. 97, 99, around there, late 1990s, very late 1990s. I actually started a little website on GeoCities, if you remember that, on steampunk, which at the time was just like retro Victorian science fiction, right? So stuff like Wild Wild West and League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, the comic, that sort of thing. And then steampunk kind of got taken over by the sort of post-goth and punk types and the makers and that sort of thing, who kind of chased off all of the people like myself who were just nerds for Victorian science fiction. And then I switched from the old GeoCities site when GeoCities collapsed, and have been running a blog on Victorian science fiction forever. And even longer than I've held out this interest in like classic monsters or Godzilla's been a lifelong thing, but like the classic monsters, universal monsters, that sort of thing, and like atomic age science fiction. Longer than I've been interested in that, I've been interested in Victorian science fiction. And there's a nice little crossover there in the history of how, in the atomic age of sci-fi, so 1950s, 1960s, there was this whole subgenre, this whole sub thing going on, this resurgence of interest in Victorian science fiction, which ostensibly kind of started with War of the Worlds, was adapted in 1953, but that one decided to just update the story, right, and set it in the modern day, 1953. But then along comes Disney, and they make 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and they make this critical choice to not update it. And as a consequence, it ends up sparking this whole subgenre of atomic age Victorian sci-fi. So to see what we're talking about here, this is a little timeline, which I mostly just figured out for myself of what was made where. But there actually is a really good book by, I can't believe I just forgot his name, Brian. Is his first name, but he passed away actually not too long ago, and he was heavily involved with the North American Jules Verne Society, which I'm a member of, and he wrote a book on Hollywood's Verne, on these atomic age Jules Verne sort of movies. And so, 1954, we get 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, the Disney film, which I did a whole video about, and how completely underrated it is in the history of movies and the history of Disney films, history of science fiction. Never gets mentioned, but it's hugely important. It's a hugely important movie, and a brilliant movie as well, but it never gets the respect it deserves. And then as a consequence, 1956 comes Around the World in 80 Days by Michael Todd. 1958, The Deadly Invention by Karel Zeman, which was released in the 60, 61, 62 as A Fabulous World of Jules Verne. Journey to the Center of the Earth, 59. Time Machine, Swiss Family Robinson, I threw that one in there. 1960. 61, you have Master of the World, which is an AIP film with Vincent Price. The Mysterious Island by effects by Harryhausen. Valley of the Dragons, which is supposedly an adaptation of On the Comet by Jules Verne. Flight of the Lost Balloon, which is supposed to be an adaptation of 5 Weeks in a Balloon by Jules Verne. And Atlantis, a Lost Continent, which is a Victorian, like it's a Victorian set story. It's inspired by Jules Verne, but not actually an adaptation. And The Fabulous Baron Munchausen, also by Karel Zeman, which is one of my favorite movies, even more than The Deadly Invention. 1962, 5 Weeks in a Balloon, prop adaptation, and Disney's In Search of the Castaways. 1963, Twice Told Tales, which was not produced by American International Pictures, but made to sort of cash in on that same genre. Stars Vincent Price, and it's based on the works of Nathaniel Hawthorne. And so there's a couple of science fiction-y sort of things in there. 1964, First Men on the Moon with effects by Ray Harryhausen. 1965, War Gods of the Deep. So that one is another American International one, ostensibly based on Edgar Allan Poe, but just its own weird Victorian sci-fi thing. A couple of these sort of screwball comedies in The Great Race and Those Magnificent Men and Their Flying Machines, and the TV series Wild Wild West as well, which is sort of fusing westerns with the spy-fi genre, which, like the American, or sorry, the British version of the Avengers, is sort of the archetypal spy-fi show. James Bond is the archetypal spy-fi movie hero. Wild Wild West is taking that whole vibe. 1967, The Stolen Airship, another wonderful, charming film by Karel Zeman. 68, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. 69, Valley of Gwangi and Captain Nemo in the Underwater City. And then we're kind of rounding it out 1970 with the Karel Zeman's On the Comet. So that is sort of what we're talking about here tonight, is this list of films that we've got here. This explosive subgenre of retro Victorian science fiction of Jules Verne, H.G. Wells, and stories inspired by them that are being sort of rewritten, recontextualized to speak to the concerns of mid-century atomic age science fiction. So there you go. That's the rundown of the genre. Now catching up here on the comments that went by as I was babbling on. Yeah, George Lucas was inspired by Dune to create Star Wars. Yeah, definitely. Kaiser, 20,000 Leagues on a Sea, premise Victorian science fiction. Absolutely. Martin, sorry to say, Dune Part 2's been postponed. Yeah, I saw that. Whatever. I'll live with it. H.G. Wells. Cavalry got to the 1800s. Yeah. Jules Verne was a genius. Yes. Because it's a classic. Yes. War of the Worlds is definitely an alien invasion story. It's the original alien invasion story. Yeah, Independence Day of the 50s. Yeah. Why does anyone tackle Jules Verne recently? Well, actually, we can talk about that. Vincent Price was in War Gods of the Deep. Yeah, he was. Valley of Gwangi is one of my favorites. Yes. Dinosaur Western, Queen says. Yeah, that's, like, there's another sort of subgenre that's connected with Victorian science fiction, which is the weird Western, right? So Valley of Gwangi is definitely one of them, where you have, in this case, cowboys and dinosaurs, right? There's cowboys and aliens. That's another weird Western. There's a Universal film, The Curse of the Undead, which is a vampire Western, which is fun. Wild Wild West, of course, science fiction Western. So I love weird Westerns, actually. My favorite weird Western is actually an Art Deco weird Western. It's The Phantom Empire, which is a 12-part serial starring Gene Autry, which is absolutely insane. If you ever get a chance to watch The Phantom Empire, do it. It's online. It's easy to find. I will probably do a video about it someday and just how wonderfully batshit crazy it is. Kaiser says, why hasn't anyone tackled Jules Verne recently? People have, actually. There was it's a Spanish miniseries based on Journey to the Center of the Earth. It just popped up on Disney Plus one day, like with no advertising. I haven't actually sat down and watched it yet because time is a thing. Um, but I've been meaning to, and definitely will have to watch it before I make a final decision on whether or not to keep Disney Plus. Um, but yeah, so it Verne does pop up on occasion. It's just I think it's Verne tends to labor under the shadow of Disney a lot, which is not necessarily a bad thing, right? We wouldn't know much about Verne at all, really, if it wasn't for Disney, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Like there, he would just fade into obscurity, really, for the most part, as far as the popular consciousness is concerned. I mean, he is still the second most translated author of all time, so people are still out there reading his books. It's just in popular consciousness, if it wasn't for Disney, he wouldn't really be the same place he is. Um, but you get partly coming out of Disney, you get this very common habit of people just sort of like completely reworking Verne into whatever they want it to be, right? So you think about like the Brendan Fraser Journey to the Center of the Earth with the sequel with The Rock, Journey to Mysterious Island. Um, you're just taking it off in this whole other direction, right? Um, I don't know how the Spanish thing does, but I mean, looking at the screenshots from the Spanish one that popped up on Disney Plus, it's definitely different. Um, but as far as like straight adaptations of 20,000 Leagues, eh. Or Verne in general, um, yeah, it's hard to say. I think a lot of people also get Verne wrong. Like they think Verne is all about the inventions, when really in Verne it's all about the exploration, and the technologies tend to be the means to the end of doing the exploration, right? So Verne wants to write a novel about the ocean. Well, what do you need to do that? You need a submarine, right? So he takes what had been developed about submarines, like submarines predate the novel. He takes what's been developed about the actual technology of submarines and then just extrapolates it into this huge thing. He wants to go to outer space, explore outer space. Well, what do you need to do that? Well, you need a spaceship, right? How are you going to do that? So he invents a giant cannon to shoot a capsule into space. Um, a lot of his movies, like In Search of the Castaways, is just an adventure story. Like there's no technology in it to speak of except for a boat. Um, it's just about exploration, right? And then the central premise is that they know that the children of Captain Grant is stranded somewhere along a certain parallel that crosses South America, Australia, and New Zealand. And it's like, okay, where is he then? Right? They narrow it down to like those locations. So it's basically just an excuse to go across those three um, continents, right? Well, two continents and an island. Um, so there's that. Journey to the Center of the Earth really is a time travel story. It's a time travel story without a time travel machine because it's not possible to time travel, and so Verne tries to skirt around the fact that the technology is impossible by writing this story in which the characters they descend down through geologic strata and eventually through time itself, right? So it's sort of like a literary device that as they're going down through the strata of the Earth's past, they eventually emerge into the Earth's past in the center of the Earth. That's the whole premise there. It's a time travel story just without time travel. Um, Remember they did Journey to the Center of the Earth with Brendan Fraser? Yeah, tried to watch that. Yeah, yeah. My wife loves the Brendan Fraser one. I do not. Um, it has its charms, but it's like I prefer the 59 version. I think the 59 version is fantastic. It's too bad it doesn't have like real dinosaurs in it, like stop motion dinosaurs. But I love that it's actually, and we talked about this last time actually. I love that it's an actual like science fiction story, right? It's not anti-science fiction, and it's not just like, oh, we just slap a technological veneer on like a fantasy story like Star Wars. It's you know it's a scientific process of discovering the mystery of what's in the center of the earth. They go down there, they come back, and then James Mason does this big speech about how science demands that we need to go back to get actual evidence. And I love that. I love that part of it. So it's actually like a pro-science science fiction movie for 1959. So I love that one. Um, The Rock usually ruins any movie he's in. My mother-in-law loves The Rock, movies with him, because she enjoys movies so that she can turn her brain off in, which is fair enough. You know, that's her taste. That's fine. Um, so she loves The Rock because you have to turn your brain off in all of The Rock's movies. There's also Around the World in 80 Days miniseries of David Tennant. I heard about that. I saw trailers for it and decided I wasn't going to bother. I mean, I love David Tennant. He's certainly amazing in like every role he's in. I'm sure he did an amazing job as Phileas Fogg, or that version of Phileas Fogg. But no, I just don't. Like I said, I'm kind of done with modern stuff, really, because it's just generally speaking so bad, to the point of being insulting, really. When they're not trying to deliberately be insulting, right, to people of various genders and skin colors and so on. So it's just like, yeah, forget it. I'm not gonna bother. So I didn't watch that, and I'm not gonna be tricked into watching Doctor Who again just because he's in it. Um, oh, I hear a door. I see a wife coming in. Oh, there she is. My wife has appeared. Oh, hello. There she is. Um, a wild wife has appeared. Oh, thank you. So yeah, I'm not gonna be tricked. Um, I did. Speaking of Around the World in 80 Days, um, the most recent film version, the one with Jackie Chan, is charming in its own right. I did enjoy it. Steve Coogan did great. Um, it was a fun, like family friendly version of like a weird historical comedy slash Jackie Chan movie. Um, so that was okay. But I think the original one, yes, with David Niven and oh shoot, what's his name? He's only the most famous like Spanish comedian of all time. Um, shoot, can't remember his name all of a sudden. Um, but oh, it's gonna bug me. It's gonna be like an hour from now. I'm gonna remember it unless somebody in the comments got it. But yeah, the 56 version, Around the World in 80 Days. Not only do I think that is the best version of Around the World in 80 Days, I actually think that is the best Hollywood Jules Verne movie. I think it's actually the best at capturing like the spirit of what a Verne novel is. Right. So Around the World in 80 Days is like the archetypal example of Verne as a pure adventure novel. So not bogged down with the technology, weirdly enough. So it's not like, oh, you're obsessed with the Nautilus or you're obsessed with the Columbiad cannon and the space capsule. It's just, just taking advantage of existing technologies to travel around the world in like an unbelievably short amount of time for the mid 1800s. But the point of the whole journey is to see these exotic places around the world, right? It's to go along with Phileas Fogg in seeing, you know, India and the Americas and so on, right? And Japan and all that. It's taking that journey with him and seeing what to you as a young reader in the 1850s would be these exotic far-flung locations. And I think the movie, thank you, Canteen Plus, thank you, Kaiser. Um, the movie does that incredibly because it's not just a story of Phileas Fogg going around the world, right? It's a movie Phileas Fogg going around the world shot on location in like Todd AO, like the super widescreen presentation. So you're like there in this bullfight in Spain. You're there at the Great Buddha of Kamakura. You're there on the train crossing the American prairies, right? Like it's all in huge scale. So you're going around the world on screen in this huge, like it's immersive scale of movie. I wish I could see that in actual the way it's supposed to be seen. Um, and so it's like it's perfectly capturing, not just in the story, not just following the plot, but in just the scale and the presentation, the on location shooting, all that sort of stuff, is capturing the spirit of going around the world and experiencing these wonders, right? Because Verne really, what Verne was ultimately replaced by in real life was like the Discovery Channel. you know, Verne, as a kid in France in the 1850s, you'd be reading Verne's work to get this experience of travel in these exotic locations. Well, now you watch National Geographic, you watch Discovery, that sort of thing. Sorry, my wife just smushed a book. So, um, that's so you even think like 1950s documentary filmmaking was also still very nascent, right, at that time. You had your early ones like Nanook of the North, right? Like that's like the earliest sort of documentary, like proper documentary. Um, but like the nature documentary didn't really develop until Disney with the true life adventure movies in the 1950s. So like so you have like the first true life adventures are like what, like 53, 54, something like that. Seal Island, 52 maybe. Can't remember the exact dates. I apologize. Um, so you get Disney is doing these first of these true life adventure movies, and then also expanding into documentaries about cultures with the people and places, which has never been released by Disney because um, they don't want to release 1950s movies about exotic cultures, right? Um, but you have these nascent documentaries, and then in comes Around the World in 80 Days, and it's doing that, right? It's showcasing these exotic places when most people still didn't have a TV, right? So it's filling it's entering into that niche, which is exactly Verne's niche. And so Around the World in 80 Days, except perfectly, like astonishingly captures the spirit of a Verne book. Um, uh, just like right down to the fabric of how that movie is made and the technology that presents that movie. So that's why get off on a whole. I should do a video about it. I should do a video about why Around the World in 80 Days is so great. But there we go. Did Around the World win an Oscar? Undoubtedly. I remember it says that on the DVD case, but I don't remember which ones it. Did it win Best Picture that year? I think, or did it get outcompeted? This is where I'm going to actually look things up now. Let me see here. Around the World in 80 Days, 1956 Oscars. Did it win Best Picture that year? It did win Best Picture. Okay. So, yeah, it won Best Picture in 57. Best Director nominee, Best Writing, Best Screenplay Adapted. It won that. Best Cinematography and Color. It won that. What else? It was a nominee for Best Art Direction, Best Costume, winner for Best Film Editing, which is usually the category reserved for science fiction movies, and Best Music winner as well. So yes, it won a number of Oscars, including Best Picture, which I think it was up against like Ten Commandments and Gunga Din as well. So it's like, that's a pretty good accomplishment there. Doctor Who was inspired by the Time Machine, yeah. Actually, did an episode where H.G. Wells met the Doctor. I did not see that episode. But that said, I have not seen most Doctor Who episodes. My favorite Doctors are the first Doctor, who remains the first Doctor. Thank you. And Tom Baker, so fourth Doctor and 10th Doctor. And I actually like the 8th Doctor as well. Terrible movie that he's in, but he Paul McGann nails it as the Doctor. Yeah, so those are my favorite Doctors. I haven't actually seen most of like the 3rd or 5th or 6th or 8th or 7th Doctors or whatever. And I tapped out a season into Matt Smith. I was done after that point. And I've watched a few episodes here and there. Every time there's a new Doctor, I give it another chance, and then it keeps disappointing me. So I do not remember the episode where he met H.G. Wells. You have to tell me which Doctor that was where he met H.G. Wells. So much classic episodes of Doctor Who on Pluto TV. Yeah, I actually used to have like as complete a DVD collection of the first Doctor as you can get. But when when I tapped out of Doctor Who, like current Doctor Who, that kind of like soured everything in a way. And I just eventually was like, I'm not going to watch these again. So I sold them off. And also, not only did I have everything you get on DVD, I also had the audios of the lost episodes and a bunch of like the Big Finish audio dramas that they made with first Doctor characters. But yeah, I don't know if they ever release, because now they're doing like complete Blu-ray sets of each Doctor. It's like all of John Pertwee, all of whoever, McCoy. That's really. If they did all of the first Doctor, I might pick that up again. But then also part of me, I look at like a complete series on disc, and I'm like, I'm never going to sit down and watch all that. Even if I like it, I'm just like, I don't have the time. So maybe not. I don't know. Tapped out when they gender swapped the Doctor. I don't mind gender and race swapping the Doctor necessarily. Like on principle, I don't mind it. In fact, I actually had an idea that what they should have done was, the Doctor reaches his 13th life. That's it. And then when the Time Lords give him more lives or whatever, he has another set of lives. Then he regenerates into a woman, and like the next 13 Doctors are all women. That actually was an idea that I like joked to a friend of mine about. So I don't mind it in principle. It's just how they do it, and how they did it with Jodie Whittaker. I feel bad for her actually, because she's not a bad actress. And the episodes that we did watch with her, like she was fine. Like she didn't exude being the Doctor like David Tennant exuded being the Doctor, but she was fine as somebody playing the Doctor. It's just the stories were so bad, and they were so like trying so hard to um, appeal to the political views of the day that it's just like, okay, that's fine. Um, and then all this nonsense with like how the Doctor has been like eternal, and the Doctor's been around forever and had infinite number of lives in the past, and the Doctor's been around so long and regenerated so many times that like everybody's the Doctor. Like you're the Doctor, I'm the Doctor, everybody's the Doctor. We just don't realize it because the Doctor is like the only being that exists, um, or whatever, which would actually make that interesting, um, if we find out that everybody is the Doctor. Um, but then it's just like, no, you took away the one thing that makes the Doctor interesting, which is that the Doctor is not special. The Doctor is not the most important and specialist person that has ever lived. The Doctor is just this Time Lord who dropped out of the Academy and ran away with a TARDIS and is bopping around the galaxy trying to do good. That's what makes the Doctor interesting. And the secrets of the Doctor's past really aren't that important. Um, it's this: the Doctor is just a guy or girl or whatever who is just bopping around the universe trying to do good and exploring and being curious and helping people out. So this whole the Doctor is the most specialist person that was ever a specialist, um, which is kind of amusing in terms of like they make the Doctor female, and then that's the story they give her, because that's sort of like the stereotypical strong woman, strong female character story nowadays, is like, really, they're the most specialist person ever, and their struggle is for everybody else to realize how special they really are. So it's like they waited for the Doctor to be female to give that story, right? Um, it's just, yeah. So I don't mind the Doctor being female just in principle. It's just how they did it, and how the stories they wrote weakened the Doctor and who the Doctor is, and just them being badly written. But to be fair, again, like I tapped out one season into Matt Smith, and no, 2 seasons. Right, I had to find out. It was the answer to the question. That was the one that made me tap out because that was so dumb. And then like we tried with Peter Capaldi, and it was just awful, which I feel really bad for, because I like Peter Capaldi as an actor. Like his roles in like Three Musketeers, and I can't remember this I can't remember the name of the show, but it's the one where he plays like the foul-mouthed media guy, newsman. Um, like they're great, and I feel so bad for him because like you can tell he's a lifelong Doctor Who fan from the first Doctor, and he's like, finally I get to play the Doctor, and he does, and it's like the most disappointing thing he's ever experienced in his life, and you can see it in his demeanor. It's just like, oh, Peter, I'm feeling you. Um, so let's see here. What was your favorite Dalek design? Actually, the new show, the 2005, like the revival version of the Dalek. So like ninth and 10th Doctor Daleks are actually my favorite design for the Daleks. Um, World War II Dalek is fun as well. Dalek. I've been learning the mid-Atlantic accent. So Dalek. Um, the World War II Daleks were fun. um, the you'd think that I liked the first Doctor Daleks, um, but they're a little too chrome and streamlined for me. So I like a little bit more of the gritty sort of steampunk look. Um, and then the revised version of them that they tried to do with Matt Smith was like whatever. The candy coated Power Ranger Daleks, not so much, but the like the bronze Daleks of the ninth and 10th Doctors is my favorite. Colin Baker plays are a bit uneven. That's what I hear. Colin Baker was introduced in Doctor Who as a villain during the Peter Davison era. Oh, I did not know that. Interesting. I guess the Doctor just remembered his face, right? And regenerated it. You know, one thing that is like a little disappointing as well is they didn't do the Valiard. Uh, in fact, well, I mean, they kind of retconned it all. So Matt Smith was the last of the original Doctor's incarnations. Um, and like I will say this. Okay, love the 10th Doctor. He should have regenerated at the end of that two-parter, or it's the beginning of the second part there of Stolen Earth and Journey's End. He gets shot by the Dalek. He starts regenerating. That's like a brilliant cliffhanger because there's actual stakes there, right? Because like with Matt Smith, right? Oh, they blow up the planet. Well, the whole universe, right? Well, the only way out of it is to unblow it up, right? So there's no tension there. You know they're going to, or else there's no show. Whereas like the Doctor regenerating, that's a cliffhanger because what happens? Like who's the new Doctor? What the heck? And then they just crapped out and made it David Tennant. It's like they should have that should have been the regeneration right there. Like in retrospect, like that should have been the end of him right there, and it would have been a hell of a way to go out. But where was I with that? Where was I going with that? Oh, right. The Valiard. Yeah, like, there's supposed to be this, like, evil version of the Doctor that spawns during his last regeneration, right? Becomes the Valiard. They didn't do it. They should have done it. That would have been good. In fact, they could have built up this whole character arc where it's like, as the Doctor knows he's getting towards the end of his lives, that he wants to keep going, and so that sort of like urge to preserve his own life then ends up manifesting in this Valiard thing that forms. And maybe he did like some experiment on himself to try and give himself more regenerations, and that's what created the Valiard or something like that. So you sort of get like this arc of basically the Doctor kind of becoming the Master, but then it fissions off to the Valiard. That would have been really cool, and it would have been like coherent with Doctor Who, like canon. But no, because Stephen Moffat was too smart for us, and he didn't want to do that, and whatever. But which is why I give up on Doctor Who as well. It's like, well, you're too twee and smart for me. Have you seen the film adaptations? I have not actually bothered to watch those. So I suppose maybe someday I should watch the alternate version of Doctor Who out there. Peter Cushing. Yep. Yeah, I think I just never bothered to watch them because it's just like, why? Like, there's sort of an interesting footnote in Doctor Who history in terms of like them doing this whole other alternate version as an adaptation of the First Doctor. But I love the First Doctor just as himself, as William Hartnell. And so I didn't really feel I need to watch the alternate movie version of him. I lost track of how many actors have played the Doctor. Well, let's see. What Doctor are we on now? So there's William Hartnell. There is, God, how long have I thought about this? Whoever the second Doctor is, Peter Troughton, John Pertwee, Tom Baker, Peter Davison, Colin Baker, um, can't remember his name now. Seventh Doctor, played a Hobbit. What was his name? Sebastian? No. God, whatever. Whatever. Who cares?
Which Hobbit?
Um, I was referring to my wife. She's a Lord of the Rings fan. So, um, and then Paul McGann, Christopher Eccleston, David Tennant, Matt Smith, Peter Capaldi, um, Jodie Whittaker, and then the Black Lady, and the infinite number of other people now that the Doctor was before the first Doctor. Right. So, Sylvester McCoy, thank you, Queen. God, it's been a while since I've thought about Doctor Who, so I forgot the names of some of the actors there. So there you go. It's been 13 proper actors and then an infinite number of faces portraying supposedly the Doctor. Now, here's another thing I would point out as well. If you wanted to go the route of, this extra dimensional entity comes through into our universe and is found by the Gallifreyans, and they discover that this thing can regenerate, and they dissect it for that technology and use whatever. It would have been more interesting if that was the Master, not the Doctor. And that was like where they were leading up to, and then they do the bait and switch, it ends up being the Doctor, and it's like, no, it would have been way more interesting if it was the Master, if they wanted to go that route with the story, and make the Master was the one who got abused by the Time Lords and whatever. But even then, it's like, I mean, originally the original Master was just like this really malevolent guy with the flamboyant villainous persona. They kind of like meh with the revival series, where always the sound of drums and all that sort of nonsense. That was all a little weak. Although David Jacobi as the Master was pretty good. I forgot that he had played him, but it just suddenly popped back in my mind because my wife and I were talking about Derek Jacobi the other day. I actually did like the one bright part of Peter Capaldi's whole run was Missy. I actually liked her. She was great. Sort of this evil Mary Poppins sort of persona. But yeah, and I have nothing against like the actor, whoever that guy is who's played him against opposite Jodie Whittaker. Like he had a defined look and everything about him. Little too much like, ooh, I'm crazy Master, as opposed to like Snidely Whiplash Master. I like him as a Snidely Whiplash. But whatever. Anyways, I digress. The would have been a more interesting story if the Time Lords had abused and tortured and dissected the Master to get regeneration technology. But whatever. BBC doesn't ask me, in my opinion. I'm just offering it for free. Tom Baker will be my favorite. Oh, he's definitely up there. Tom Baker was actually the one I grew up with. That was the one I saw most often on PBS, because where I live in Canada, we would get PBS from the United States, from Kalispell, Spokane, that area. So on PBS they would show Doctor Who, and sometimes it was Pete Davidson, but most of the time it was Tom Baker. So that's the one I actually grew up with. Then I was a teenager, it was Paul McGann, and then all my friends were raving about how great this David Tennant guy was, so I started watching it, like, oh my god, he is great. And then that led me back to the original Doctor. So now the first Doctor is my favorite Doctor, William Hartnell. And so it'd be William Hartnell, then David Tennant, then Tom Baker, and then Paul McGann would be my favorites. H.G. Wells also created... Careful, Jelly Baby. H.G. Wells also created The Invisible Man. Yes, he did. Ever see Leave Extraordinary Gentlemen? She included Captain Nemo, The Invisible Man. I have not seen the movie because I like the comics. I collect... In fact, I have a complete set of the Leave Extraordinary Gentlemen comics by Alan Moore. So when the movie was made, like everyone in like the steampunk scene at the time, which is still before it became like sort of the subculture of people dressing up in like brown suits with unnecessary gears glued onto it. Everyone was like, what is this piece of garbage that this came out? That is not the Leave Extraordinary Gentlemen. So I didn't bother. That was one I just did not bother watching, and I just stuck with the comics, which, not saying the comics ended up all that great either. The last one, The Tempest, there really wasn't necessary after the Blazing World. After the Black Dossier, everything else was like kind of like, okay, we're just getting back to where we left off at the end of the Black Dossier. But the first two Lee Victorian Gentleman comics, so volumes 1 and volumes 2, and the Captain Nemo comics are actually really good. Black Dossier and The Tempest and Century are a bit like meh. Although I will give Alan Moore some props for the chutzpah of making Harry Potter into the Antichrist. So I see the remake of the Time Machine, the one with Guy Pearce in it and Jeremy Irons as the chief Morlock. I did see that one. It is a movie that exists. Actually, that was the movie I watched where I thought, you know what? If they ever do like a new Universal Monsters movie, Jeremy Irons should play the Frankenstein monster. Because he looks like Boris Karloff, and by being in both the Time Machine and Dungeons and Dragons proves that he has no dignity. So he'd be perfectly happy to be in a remake of Universal Monsters and star as the Frankenstein monster. If I was going to do a modern movie of Universal Monsters, I would get Jeremy Irons to play the Frankenstein monster, and I would use CGI to pretty much do everybody else. So, you know, since the whole like, oh no, dead actors and likenesses and stuff is a big thing right now, yes, I would absolutely use the original likeness of Bela Lugosi as to play Dracula again. I'd probably have to recast Dr. Pretorius though, and then the Bride of Frankenstein's head in a jar would just be CGI. My wife just started laughing, like, where'd that come from? Yes, my story would involve the Bride of Frankenstein's head being in a jar. Like the original Time Machine a lot more. Yeah, I actually just watched that the other day with Rod Taylor, and I can't remember his name. I'm having a hell of a time tonight remembering people's names. The original guy that played the voice for Uncle Scrooge, he's also in that movie, and Sebastian Cabot has a cameo in it, who is one of weirdly my favorite actors, Sebastian Cabot. So, yeah, the original Time Machine is as good as it's probably ever going to get as far as an adaptation of the Time Machine goes. It would be cool if they did a competent modern version of the Time Machine, where like before he bounces into the future, you could do like the past and go to like Roman Londinium and go back to the time of dinosaurs and stuff like that. Have those little vignettes in the past before he decides to go forward. Like just throw some extra scenes in there. And since I have no respect for H.G. Wells as a person, I don't mind changing his work. So, whatever. But Alan Young, thank you. Yeah, I think the 1960 Time Machine is probably the best adaptation we're ever going to get of the Time Machine. Doctor Who spin-offs like Torchwood and Sarah Jane Adventures. I only watched those where they crossed over with Doctor Who. I wasn't really interested in them because it was Doctor Who himself I was interested in. So the spin-offs were like, meh. If I watched Van Helsing, oh my god, yes. Okay, so here's that's my wife gagging in the background. So when Van Helsing came out, I was not planning on seeing it because I was like, ugh, terrible modern and remake, not gonna bother. But at the same time, they released the original Legacy collections of the monster films on DVD, and I picked up those. And with each one of those came a coupon to see Van Helsing for free. So I grabbed a friend of mine, who's an on-again, off-again girlfriend at the time, and she was not thrilled with the idea of seeing Van Helsing. She did not like scary movies, and she's like, no, thank you. I'm like, no, seriously, it's going to be terrible. Like, just come with me. And so she did. And it was, I'm sorry if you like it. I apologize if you like it. More power to you. However, for us, it was so terrible that we were actually laughing during it. At the end, when you have a scene very reminiscent from The Lion King. We just lost it completely. Just howls of laughter. And then as we were leaving, these guys behind us, I feel a bit bad for them, but um, as we were leaving, these guys behind us were talking about, well, I didn't think it was that bad. And then my friend, she turns around and is just like, you're wrong! It was terrible! Which is like, sorry. They felt kind of bad. I felt kind of bad for them. I was very forthright, but she was also like very forthright person. So she was like, she was my manic pixie dream girl phase. So she was like that person for me there for a little bit. But yeah, so um, that is my Van Helsing story. There were good parts about it, though. I mean, Kate Beckinsale in tight leather is always good.
She never even wore a skirt once. Sorry.
I don't know if you all heard that. That's my wife complaining that Kate Beckinsale never wore a skirt in the 1800s.
Not once.
No one wants to see Kate Beckinsale in a skirt. They want to see her in tight leather.
You can make a sexy skirt.
And I liked when the Frankenstein monster was captured and he's like shouting these like Shakespearean profanities. That part was really fun. Like funny in a good way. Like it was intentionally funny and I enjoyed it. But most of it was just not my cup of tea. So, and it is it's kind of like Exhibit A in a way of how Universal doesn't get the monsters. And I've talked about this in my video about why the Epic Universe Monsterland is going to be terrible. And I hope I'm wrong about that, but I'm not going to be wrong about that. Universal doesn't understand the monsters. They don't understand the appeal of the monsters. And so they keep trying to bring them back primarily as action movies. So like Van Helsing is just like a post-underworld action movie. Then you had like Dracula Untold. You had The Mummy with Tom Cruise, where they're trying to make a whole ass dark universe, cinematic universe.
They took them out of Egypt. What's the point? Sorry.
Yeah, well, what's the point of having the mummy? It's not in Egypt, right? I myself personally wasn't overly fond of the 1990s Mummy, but my wife is, so I have to watch my mouth. But I mean, it has its good parts as like a poor man's Indiana Jones adventure. So there you go. So I got what it was doing. It's just like meh. I also saw what it was doing, so I'm like meh. But they don't get that the appeal of the monsters is that they are gothic horrors. That's what is good about them. That's what people like about them. So, but gothic horror doesn't really play well today. It's a very acquired taste compared to sort of modern horror, which is all like slasher movies or like found footage or whatever. Which also wouldn't fit the monsters, right? You could try turning the monsters into like slasher things, which is what they do at the Halloween Horror Nights, Universal Halloween Horror Nights. Is they basically try to turn them into slasher monsters. It's like they don't work as that either. They are gothic horrors. The horror of them is the battle between good and evil, and the things man was not meant to know, and this trespass into the shadow realms beyond the comforts of reason and civilization. And they don't get that because that's not really scary to people anymore. So, because people don't believe in it, right? It's hard to make a horror out of somebody's soul being damned when nobody believes in a soul, right? So it's hard to do that. And I did think that the Benicio del Toro Wolfman was actually the best attempt so far at remaking Universal Monsters. It kind of falls apart at the end, but for the most part, I thought that's about the closest it's gotten so far to getting it right. What I would do if I was put in charge of the Universal Monsters franchise, if I became the brand manager for Universal Monsters, is so Universal, if you're listening, is I would make a cartoon. Actually, I would make a cartoon very much in the style of Batman the Animated Series, where you reintroduce the monsters, you readapt the original movies into this like half-hour cartoon format, and then you also start to like fold in some original stories as well into that, and build up this universe with this cartoon. So you're reacquainting kids with it. Another thing I would do is I would make cheap toys that kids can collect. And so kind of like reaction figures, but that are priced for kids to buy, not for 45-year-old men to buy. And I saw this thing, it was a million years ago, but these like little CD-ROMs that are shaped like business cards. They're the size of a business card, and they're actually like rectangular shaped because they don't have to be a circle to fit in your player. These little CD-ROMs, um, and put clips from the movies on there. And so each figure is packed with one of a relevant scene, like the creation of the bride figures with the creation of the bride, right? Obviously. But then you also sell packs of these things, and kids like blind bags, packs of these things, and kids can like collect them and trade them like baseball cards. Not that kids do that with baseball cards anymore, because baseball cards are just 45-year-old men. But basically, try and get kids reacquainted with these characters and acquainted with the scenes in them that they're in, reacquainted with the movies through these little discs, these little scenes, kind of like the old Castle films, the old Super 8 reels. And then I would CGI up a movie, black and white, done like in the style, like it could be the next movie in the series of the monsters, with Dracula and the Frankenstein monster and the Bride of Frankenstein's head in a jar. That would be what I would do. The main things I would do as the brand manager. I would also have it in the theme parks, but have it themed to the original characters. So not this like Halloween Horror Nights sort of bootleg version of them where they're trying to be slasher monsters. It blows my freaking mind. I did that video about the how the Epic Universe Monsterland is going to be bad, and since then, yeah, it's been like pretty much all but confirmed that the name of the Wolfman roller coaster is going to be Revenge of the Werewolf. And it's like, Universal, you do know that the trademarked name you have is Wolfman, right? Like, that's the brand, you dumbasses. Why are you doing like Revenge of the Werewolf? What the hell's wrong with you? Your brand is the Wolfman. Come on. So that just tells me that they don't have a clue what they're doing. And so, whatever. And they're not paying me to. Where am I? Direction my hat going on here? They're not paying me to do it for them. So I'm happy to give them free ideas. But whatever. Gotta catch up on the comments here. He's got me on for a rant about something completely not at all related to Victorian sci-fi. I know that Universal released 2 Dracula films recently, but they have flopped. Modern day audiences probably have vampire fatigue. It's fine because vampires are kind of overrated. Yeah, sure. I'm not gonna. I mean, whatever. Vampires as action heroes is not interesting to me, and vampires as Twilight things is, well, I mean, it was popular with teenage girls and middle-aged housewives. So more power to them. God bless them. I'm not a millionaire. But yeah, I think the last good vampire movies that I remember seeing are Interview with the Vampire, the movie, not the TV show, and Bram Stoker's Dracula. Those were the last interesting vampire movies that I remember seeing. Haven't seen. I've kind of been wanting to see that last Voyage of the Demeter, but have not because I just don't think about Hollywood movies anymore in the theater. I think the remake of The Wolfman covered that. Tom Cruise Mummy wasn't so bad, Queen Glamazona says. See the remake of The Invisible Man. Remake of Sleep with the Enemy. I did not see The Invisible Man. Because it's not The Invisible Man, it's just a movie about a stalker with a suit that they called The Invisible Man. And just because you give it the same title doesn't make it the same story. So I did not bother. Wolfman and F.K. Hawkins, yeah. They should make a team of superheroes with Universal monsters. It could include Frankenstein, his bride, Dracula, the Wolfman, the Mummy, Creature in the Black Lagoon. You know, the extraordinary monsters. You know, actually, now that I think about it, thanks for reminding me. The best attempt I have seen, the single best attempt I have seen to remake the Universal Monsters was the TV series Penny Dreadful. That was fantastic. Fell apart a bit in the third season, but fantastic show. Little heavy on the gore and the sex. Everybody has to sleep with Dorian Gray, apparently. Um, but as far as an attempt to do a modern gothic horror version of the Universal Monsters, absolutely perfect. Just spot on. Nailed it. Um, so yeah, so that you just reminded me of that because while they're not like a team of superheroes, it's definitely like an ensemble cast of monsters. And so you have the Wolfman, you have well, Dracula doesn't show up until the third season, but he's a presence because it's Mina's father who puts the team together. Um, you have oh, what's her name?
Billy Piper?
No, gorgeous actor chick.
Ava Green?
Ava Green, thank you. Gorgeous actor chick. Thanks. Thanks. Sexist pig, Cory. Um, Ava Green as sort of an entry point character is what you see through, and she's sort of like um, a young lady besieged by Satan, basically. Um, you have the Frankenstein monsters lurking in the background. You have Dr. Frankenstein, there's Dorian Gray as sort of this gadfly on the edge of the group. You have Billy Piper as the bride of Frankenstein. Um, Dracula's in there. The only one they didn't have was the mummy and the creature. So, and the mummy's actually in the comics. They did like a season 4 comic book that had the mummy in it. But yeah. Why didn't they ever have Sherlock Holmes meet Count Dracula? That's a good question, considering that Universal took over the Sherlock Holmes franchise and transplanted it into the then modern day, where Sherlock Holmes is fighting Nazis. Could have had a crossover with Universal Monsters, but I guess they didn't bother. Found Renfield a bit disappointing. I completely forgot Renfield existed. I did not see it. So, there you go. I was tempted to, and then I was tempted to up to the last trailer. Then I watched the last trailer, and I was like, no, tap out. Because it's like, okay, you want to do like this, like comedy, kind of like a What We Do in the Shadows. Oh my god, I forgot about What We Do in the Shadows. Well, that's not really a vampire story, it's like a comedy. But it's kind of like What We Do in the Shadows, but with Renfield and Dracula. Like, okay, that could be fun. I like What We Do in the Shadows. It's one of the only reasons I keep Disney Plus around. And then the last thing is like, oh, it's like an action movie sort of thing. Forget it, don't care. So that like killed it right off, like dead. Yes, What We Do in the Shadows is great though. So as a vampire comedy, love What We Do in the Shadows. That's great. I don't know how it happened, but Colin Robinson, the energy vampire, became my favorite character. But Laszlo's great too. But
Nadia's dresses.
and my wife loves Nadia's fashions. But yeah, I don't know. Colin Robinson is like my favorite character. The show.
I don't know what that means.
I'm an energy vampire. That's what this whole thing is. I'm just boring you all to death, and I'm absorbing your energy. Let's see. Remake of The Invisible Man was made for people who know absolutely nothing about The Invisible Man. Yep, I bet. We should go back on the topic of Victorian science fiction. Thank you, Martin. Let's see. Oh yeah, there we go. So Victorian science fiction. Yes, somebody again noticed the Karel Zeman films up there. Yes, Karel Zeman is absolutely amazing. I will do a video about him at some point. I've been too busy to do a whole lot of new videos, so I've been falling behind. But by the end of September, I won't have any more tours that I'm doing for my summer work here, so I'll have a lot more time on my hands to do more videos. But Karel Zeman is aesthetically the best at translating Verne stories and Verne ideas onto film, because his films look like the engravings from Verne's stories brought to life. Like, it's incredible. And there's like, I think somebody actually counted it once. I read a review in The Deadly Invention, which is also known as Fabulous World of Jules Verne. There's like 7 different styles of animation going on in one scene. Like, it's just all these different effects they pull together to create this image of one of these engravings from an original Verne novel brought to life. And yeah, absolutely stunning. Just stunning work. So, The Fabulous World of Jules Verne, aka The Deadly Invention, The Stolen Airship, which is loosely based off Mysterious Island, and 2 Years Vacation, and On the Comet are the most direct adaptations of Verne. But Verne ideas and Verne characters show up in The Fabulous Baron Munchausen as well, which is one of my favorite movies. I think it's Zeman's best movie is actually his Baron Munchausen movie. So yeah, and I'm glad that Criterion put out this absolutely stunning set of these 3 films. Like they put so much work into the case. Usually and I'm gonna probably do a video someday about how I've actually like redone my collection, because I make like custom cases for my home video collection because I'm anal and I need to. I have so many, I have to shrink it all down. But this is one I have not made cases for because the case itself that Criterion made is so beautiful. There's this little insert here. Looks like a newspaper. Yeah, there's the pop up for Journey to the Beginning of Time, and yeah, each film in this set has like its own like pop up thing going on here. And Baron Munchausen, the scene where he's gets shot on the thing. So just absolutely stunning presentation on this as well, which is befitting of the stunning films in them. I've been waiting because the prints that are on these discs are the the prints from the Karel Zeman Museum in the Czech Republic, and the ones that actually sell through the museum, they are region free, so you can actually watch them anywhere in the world. And the temptation is to finish my collection by just buying the discs from them, but I'm really waiting for Criterion to bring them over because Karel Zeman Volume 2 with the same presentation would just be gorgeous. So I'm really hoping that they do that, because the remaining films, because this one only has Journey Beginning of Time, Invention for Destruction, or Deadly Invention, or Fabulous World Jules Verne, and Fabulous Baron Munchausen. There's still Krabat, which is one of his animated film. There's On the Comet. There's Stolen Airship. So there's those 3 still to release. So that's another perfect set. Criterion, get on it. But yeah, absolutely gorgeous presentation on that for gorgeous films. So if you have not seen Karel Zeman's films, go see Karel Zeman's films by hook or crook, because they're absolutely stunning, and just love them. Yeah, Journey Beginning of Time is an interesting little film about prehistory. Yeah, it's loosely based off of a novel by it's a 1915 novel. I don't remember the author, but the art was by Zdeněk Burian, who's a Czech paleo artist. In fact, the paintings in last month, the dinosaur one, was all of his paintings, Zdeněk Burian's. Plutonia is the name of the novel. And yeah, it's just like, this, it's that very Verne-esque, sort of like these kids just are on a raft and they go down the river of time to the beginning of time, right? It's that, again, very Verne-esque sort of exploration into deep time. It's just, instead of going down into the center of the planet, they just take this river of time to the beginning of the world. And it's a little dry as far as like dramatic tension goes, because it is basically a travelogue of children going down this river of time, seeing effects of dinosaurs and things. But it is an interesting little movie, certainly, and one of the ones he's best known for, because that was one of the ones that was actually released in the United States. Fabulous World of Jules Verne was imported, and Journey to the Beginning of Time was imported. The other ones weren't really. So Those are the two that he's best known for in this part of the world. Seen Valley of the Dragons. I have not seen Valley of the Dragons. There is a disc a set put out by Mill Creek that has that on it, and I've been wanting to get a copy of it, but I just haven't seen it around, and I haven't seen it online for a price I'm willing to pay for it. But someday I'd like to actually see Valley of the Dragons. How did MST3K ever miss Valley of the Dragons? Yeah, they managed to get This Island Earth somehow, but missed that one, Valley of the Dragons is a clip fresh from other movies, especially 1 million BC. Yeah, oh yeah, reusing the two lizards fighting. Yeah. Jules Verne's Master of the World, first novel about a flying machine. Go back to Queen mentioned the Fabulous World of Jules Verne, the TV series. I never really saw that one on the first run, even though it's Canadian and I'm Canadian. I'm familiar with it. I've seen a few episodes of it. Follows the same sort of premise that Verne was not a fiction writer. Verne was a reporter of events that happened to him, which is interesting enough. I mean, it's nice to have a show about Jules Verne, right? Verne's Master of the World. Yeah. Here's something I will say about the movie version of that 1961 film starring Vincent Price, is that they basically just make it a knockoff of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, right? Like, it's the same basic plot. A bunch of characters, they get essentially abducted by this mad scientist guy with his fabulous invention, who is using it to wage war on war. So it's basically the same movie. But even though Master of the World has a significantly lower budget as an American International Pictures film, it actually, I think, the plot is better in it. The writing in it is a lot better because, at the end of the day, Captain Nemo in Disney's 20,000 Leagues has rather pedestrian motivations, right? Like, he's out for revenge. That's why he's doing what he's doing. And it kind of distills down to that. And, he has all these high ideals about, life under the waves. But, like, we don't even know the crewmen's names. We only, they just disappear until they're needed, right? So they're just these, background entities. You don't get a sense of, this camaraderie where these people would be willing to die for Captain Nemo, right? They're willing to go down with the ship. We were just sort of told that they are. Whereas in Master of the World, first of all, Vincent Price does this excellent job of portraying this ideologue, right? Who is he's waging war on war, and that's his motivation. That's all we know about him, is that he is this mission. He quotes the Bible and he bombs war zones. And you can credibly believe that he's actually driven by his ideology, whereas Nemo in the Disney version, he's obviously driven by revenge. Whereas Robert, he's driven by his ideology. However, he's also being torn apart by it because he wants peace, and he feels like he's driven to violence to achieve that end. And that's ripping him apart, and he gets more and more unhinged as the movie goes along, to the point where ultimately it risked the ship itself, right? So you get the sense of him being torn apart by the disconnect between his ideology of pacifism and his use of violence to try and get there, right? Because the means are the ends, and that's ripping him apart. That tension's ripping him apart. And then you have actual characters on the ship. His crew are actual characters, and he has a rapport with them. And I can actually believe that those crewmen would go down with the ship, because they actually have this rapport and this camaraderie with Robert. I thought it's much better. And then the characters brought into it, especially Charles Bronson's character, there's so much ambiguity among them. You have in Disney's 20,000 Leagues, you have the tension, you have the tensions between the characters. So, you have like Aronnax, he wants to get on Nemo's side to save his inventions for science. Um, but Ned Land wants to just get off the ship and stop Nemo and those tensions. Whereas in Master of the World, you have the guy who makes his money as a weapons dealer, manufacturer. You have the Southern gentleman who gets less and less gentlemanly as the situation pushes against his own ideology, right? So he's sort of like a micro version of Robert, where the situation is pushing against his ideologies of being a Southern gentleman, and he's cracking under it, and eventually tries to kill someone in a very dishonorable way. And you have Charles Bronson, who is ostensibly the hero, right? He's the government agent who's trying to stop the madman from destroying the world. But again, he's kind of like the shifty character, dishonorable character who's working for the government. So, like, it's very ambiguous in all of this. So I think actually that Disney's version is classic. Disney's version is wonderful. Obviously, I like it because I have my 20,000 Leagues stuff all out here. But I think in terms of the writing, I actually think Master of the World, despite being a super low budget movie, is actually a better written movie. And plus Vincent Price. I mean, James Mason is also amazing. Vincent Price though is classic, of course. Bronson and Vincent Price worked together in House of Wax. Yeah, maybe they had the same agent. Maybe. Vincent Price, a brilliant actor. Agreed. Recently watched Adventures of Baron Munchausen, directed by Terry Gilliam. Yeah. What about Mysterious Island? Great special effects by Ray Harryhausen. Yes. Mysterious Island is hilarious because it is as close as you can get to a sequel to Disney's 20,000 Leagues without getting sued by Disney. And in fact, it is part of my favorite unintentional movie trilogy. So you begin with 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Right? You have this movie. Okay, we all know it. Then Columbia comes along, Ray Harryhausen, and they make Mysterious Island, which is the sequel novel to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And they try to make it as a movie, as a sequel, that is as close as possible to Disney's film without infringing copyright. So the Nautilus looks as close as you can get without infringing copyright. Herbert Lom is as close as you can get to James Mason's Nemo without violating copyright. Okay, now, in the movie, they find the remains of this pirate that has been marooned on the island, named Thomas Ayrton. Now, that is a reference to the Jules Verne novel In Search of the Castaways. Because Mysterious Island also acts as a quasi-sequel to In Search of the Castaways, the novel. Well, year after Mysterious Island, Disney adapts In Search of the Castaways into a family musical starring Hayley Mills and Maurice Chevalier. So what you end up with is this unintentional trilogy of films made by two different companies in two different genres, where part 3 was released before part 2. So it's like this weird, fascinating thing because they were adapting the source material, they ended up with this unintentional trilogy of movies, which I find rather delightful. And I guess Disney got the last laugh because the theme music, Byron Harmon's theme song from Mysterious Island, is also now used as the background music for the Primeval World diorama at Disneyland. So when you're riding the train around and you go to the part with the dinosaurs, it's playing the theme from Mysterious Island. So there you go. Maybe that was part of the deal to not sue Columbia for making that movie, was they got to use the music or something. Giant crab in that one, yep. These remains of an actual crab in that film. How they actually turned a real crab into Oh yeah. I did not know about that. But since we're talking about Mysterious Island, we showed this like the very first live stream. But this is my little fishbowl diorama that I made of inspired by the movie Mysterious Island. So there's the Union soldiers fighting off a giant crab there. So I made that, and this other one here of a soldier being stomped on by a diatrema, giant the terror birds. I have every intention of redoing these dioramas because fish bowls get very dusty. So I need to put them into like a bell jar. Remake them. Speaking of which, this is my bell jar diorama of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. So this ornament was from the Disney store back when those still existed. Remember that? And I picked up like 3 or 4 of these ornaments just in case. And yeah, so then I just cobbled together the pieces. The only part in here that I actually like sculpted on my own was the sea serpent, which is a model on the sea serpent from the old Disney World ride. So that guy in there. But everything else is just like stuff I found objects, a lot of fish tank ornaments, things like that, with a few little secret things in the back there. Atlantis. Um, so yeah. Anyways, that's my diorama, which is really mostly an homage to the Disney World ride that I never got to ride because it was extinguished long before I even got back into being a Disney fan. So I never got to ride the ride at Disney World. I did. Um, I've ridden every other ride. I've been on the one in Paris, been on the Nautilus walkthrough in Paris, and I've been on I've been to Tokyo Disney, and I've ridden the rides there. And in fact, their version of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and Journey to the Center of the Earth, those rides are tied for my favorite theme park rides anywhere in the world. But I never got to ride the Disney World ride, which is too bad. If I could go back in time, what would I do? See dinosaurs? See Jesus? No, I would go on to old Disney rides that aren't there anymore. Some crabs were actually harmed in making the film. I can believe that. Thank you for that's so cool. I hope you were talking about my dioramas and not the crabs. The giant bird, Mysterious Island, lots of character. I actually felt sorry for it when it got killed off. Yeah. Another diorama I was thinking about making was also one with the giant bees. Yeah, there, Kaiser just mentioned them. Because you can get, because the animals that I used here are actually from Safari Limited. You know, the people make like all the toy dinosaurs and stuff. I just use their stuff. And they do have like large bees, larger than life-size bee toys. So I thought that would be perfect for the giant bee scene. And I also have, hold on a sec, I have this, which has been waiting to be made into part of a diorama. So this chained up, not all the way here. This is from Popo as well. Yeah, that's a Popo figure. So that's been waiting to get turned into a Mysterious Island diorama as well. Also, that's actually what I picked up this for as well. This is a fish tank tiki that I fixed up. That this was actually my plan for this is actually to make a little like tropical island with a mermaid, but never got around to it for various and sundry reasons. So yeah, but since making these dioramas, these fishbowl dioramas, my diorama making abilities have gotten a lot better because I've been doing like more in the way of model building and custom toys and that sort of thing. So now I think I could redo these a lot better than I did them originally, and I want to put them in a bell jar instead of a fishbowl so that it keeps the dust off them. So someday that'll happen. Someday. Along with everything else I want to do someday. Maybe after summer when I have no more jobs. And I just am sitting at the store all day doing nothing. I'll have time to make more videos and do more dioramas and things. We shall see. The giant mollusk, yes. I actually have another, is he here? No, it must be in my box. Because Schleich put out these Ammonite figures. There's this one, and then there's an even bigger one. It's supposed to be like a Titanides, like those giant Ammonites that are like tractor tire size. Um, I have the model for that one as well, and I thought about if I want to use that one to make that Mysterious Island diorama. But then this guy came out, and I'm like, oh, this one is perfect. This one looks more like a Harryhausen sort of monster, underwater monster thing. So I'm going to use that one instead. What Jules Verne adaptation are you least impressed with? There's so many that are so bad. I mean, there's, there's a lot of those direct-to-TV ones, like 20,000 Leagues with Patrick Stewart, those sorts of garbage ones. So I suppose those would be the least impressive ones. For like, if we're thinking like big budget, like real movie ones, that's a good question. I guess of the big budget real ones, I would say, I guess it'd be like the 3D Journey movies, right? So the Brendan Fraser and Rock ones. But in keeping with the subject, what we're talking about, the Atomic Age ones, then I would say probably 5 Weeks in a Balloon. So that has red buttons in it, and dude, oh, he's in like a million Universal movies. Why am I drawing a blank on all the actors in these movies tonight? Sir Cedric Hardwicke in it. Yeah, that one, they tried. God bless them, they tried. Peter Lorre's got a cameo in it. He's got a small role in it. God bless them, they tried to do the Verne thing, right? He's got Fabian in it as well. So they got Fabian singing the song like Pat Boone in Journey. It's got funny animals, it's got Peter Lorre, it's got the fabulous invention, it's got the footage from Africa, it's got all that stuff. They're trying. But it doesn't quite gel together into something that is particularly enjoyable to watch. I watch it occasionally, but not particularly often. So I'm least impressed by it, as opposed to like I hate it. I don't hate it. It's just I'm least impressed by it. And then there's parts in it that like, because it's 1965 thereabouts. Hold on, when did that one come out? Let me just pop that up here. What were we? 62. Sorry. Not overly sensitive portrayals of other cultures. And there's part like I have a pretty thick skin for that kind of thing. Like, I think if you're into Victorian history and even like mid-century history and entertainment, you have to develop a thick skin about racial representation, which someone will say easy for you to say. Except my family, I am one generation removed from the largest ethnic cleansing in human history. My dad came to Canada after his family were ethnically cleansed. So whatever, it's not easy for me to say. You have to develop a thick skin, right? You have to be able to watch a movie from the 30s or a movie from the 40s or 50s or 60s and go like, that is an artifact of its time period, and I'm going to admire the admirable parts of this movie and dismiss the dated and racist parts of this movie. Like, you just have to do that or else you can't enjoy it. And if you don't enjoy it, you're going to miss out on brilliant movies if you can't do that. However, there are some movies where it's just like, oh, really? Is that necessary? And there are parts of 5 Weeks in a Balloon where it's just like, ugh, really? Like that's even racist for the time period. So that would probably be the one I'm least impressed by for Verne adaptations from the Atomic Age little subgenre there, the 50s and 60s. Looks like Giant Self on the actual film, yeah. Weird that Disney hasn't done a remake of 20,000 Leagues. They keep threatening it. Disney keeps threatening to make either a remake or a prequel or a Disney Plus series or something with 20,000 Leagues. And thankfully, they just keep threatening it, and it never actually materializes. The last ones that were really going to be something where like McGee was attached to a prequel at one point. Will Smith was attached to a prequel at one point. Um, I think I've heard rumors floating around about a Disney Plus series. Um, I mean, I don't trust modern Disney to make something good. I mean, at least with 20,000 Leagues, you do have like built-in organic diversity, right? Like if you go back to the original race of the character, then okay, you have um, like a brown-skinned person could be played by somebody from India or somebody from the Middle East quite easily. In fact, my vote for who I would like to play Captain Nemo is Oded Fehr. So he was the guy that played Ardeth Bay in the 1990s Mummy, and he's done a few other great roles since then. And also he's in Star Trek Discovery, which is like, but he looks the part, like he's perfect, and he's a great actor, just himself. He'd be my vote to play Nemo. And so you have that built-in diversity already, and he's fighting against imperialism. So there you go. So it's not like this huge stretch to try and make it appeal to certain political demographics today in the way that, like, say they're trying to make Snow White into like weird. Oh my god, like so weird. You don't need to do that with 20,000 Leagues. It's already there, right? But that said, I still don't trust that they would not screw it up somehow. And I'm not even that picky when it comes to 20,000 Leagues. So the last time they did anything new with 20,000 Leagues was Once Upon a Time. If you ever saw that show. Right, so it was an ABC show, so Disney by, extension, where you had all of the characters from fairy tales are cursed to live in our world. And it took them till the fourth season. No, not even fourth season. God, how long was that around for? Sixth season.
Fifth or sixth.
There was a sixth season where they finally brought Captain Nemo in, and it was fine. I didn't mind it. By contrast, earlier that season they did an episode with the Count of Monte Cristo, and the Count of Monte Cristo is my wife's favorite book, and she was appalled. Like she more or less loved Once Upon a Time until that episode. And then it was like, screw this show. And I thought it was amusing. And then it's like, what are they going to do to Captain Nemo? And it's like, you know what? They got the submarine right. That's fine. Like, I'm so not picky about 20,000 Leagues that it was just like, they got this right. They got the right submarine. It's fine. They didn't redesign the Nautilus. That's fine. Whatever.
Even you have to admit that Monte Cristo was bad.
That, I don't know if you heard that.
Sorry.
That was my wife saying that, and it was. Like, how they did the Count of Monte Cristo was terrible. Completely missed the subtlety of the novel. But it's also subject to the fact that, like, nobody who's watching American TV knows what the Count of Monte Cristo is. So, yeah, it's, they had to deal with that. Why they even bothered to do a story with the Count of Monte Cristo, I have no idea. For how much they had to change it.
The land of unread books.
The land of unread books. Yeah, that was our nickname for the storyline. Because they, I guess they felt like they exhausted fairy tales. So they did this, where they did this little brief stint in the land of untold stories, which my wife and I nicknamed the land of unread books. So they had Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde were in there, and the Count of Monte Cristo was in there, and Captain Nemo was in there, and all these things. But yeah, they got the submarine right. That's all I really cared about, because ABC is owned by Disney, and if Disney does not use Disney's version of the Nautilus, what are they doing? What are they even doing? So even as somebody who's not picky about 20,000 Leagues, I just don't trust modern Disney to make a good movie anymore. So even not being picky about it, it'd still be like, this would still be a terrible show anyways, because if we're done by modern Disney. So it's just like, yeah, whatever. Just go to Japan. Just fly to Japan, go ride the ride. That's fine. Watch the original movie. It still exists. It's not going to go away just because they make a terrible remake of it. In fact, we watched Little Mermaid the other day, the original Disney animated film. It's like, oh, that's a really good movie. I really love that movie. It's great. So well done. Howard Ashman was a genius. Yeah,
Pacing was
it's
fantastic.
it's like they never made another one.
They didn't.
They didn't even make another. Didn't have to. That one was already perfect. Kaiser remembers Once Upon a Time. Yeah, it was. Well, the first season was great. Second season was pretty okay, and then it kind of like depend. The half seasons they did there for like what 4 years varied. Some of them were really good. Some of them were just god awful. And then the sixth season there, we got about halfway through it, and then just kind of petered out. Like we stopped caring. And
The Count broke me.
Count Monte Cristo broke my wife. And then the last season, seventh season, they completely rebooted the show, which is like, why bother? It's like that's the death knell of this show. Is they completely rebooted it. So, yeah. So we still haven't even seen the seventh season. Been meaning eventually to sit down and finish the sixth season, but just never get around to it because you kind of psych yourself up for it, right?
You don't mess with the Count of Monte Cristo.
Don't mess with the Count of Monte Cristo. Rather like the Disney Nautilus, Kirk Douglas was strange casting though. Yeah, well, I mean, Kirk Douglas was, yeah, Queen's like, he's as manly as it gets, right? He's supposed to be the counterpoint to Nemo, right? Nemo is like sort of the um sort of like the effeminate European intellectual, right? He's a brain guy and he's European. So Ned Land was supposed to be the counterpoint as the muscular, manly man, the American man of action, right? And that was supposed to be the counterpoint between those two guys. And there were different ways of approaching the world, right? So I understand the casting choice. Plus, I mean, Kirk Douglas was huge at that time, right? Like Spartacus, like Kirk Douglas was a huge actor at that time. So it made sense to get him in there as a star power, right? It'd be like putting The Rock in a movie today, except that Kirk Douglas is a way better actor than The Rock is. To understand that, it would have been nice if they had kept Ned Land's original ethnicity, though, as a French Canadian, Quebecois. But that's just me speaking as a Canadian. So I know Disney has no respect for us, since they renovated the Jungle Cruise to take out anything that would be offensive to anybody, and then added in a joke about Canadians. Thanks, Disney. Now I feel so included in a ride that I used to love. Ned Land knew how to party. He was on his way to a threesome at the beginning. Yeah, he was. He had a prostitute on either arm. Yeah. I would have joined the party, Queen says. Excellent. Nice. I would have been Ned Land's wingman, Kaiser replies. Yeah, pretty spicy for a Disney movie, eh? And I actually found it interesting. Like, as much as I said how I think the writing in Master of the World is better than 20,000 Leagues, I think it's hard to compete with just how iconic a movie 20,000 Leagues is. And which is why I think it's sad it doesn't get the attention it deserves. Like, it really should. Disney should give it more love. Everyone should give it more love. It should be on every top 50 sci-fi movies list. It should be on every top 50 Disney movies list. It's never on either. And one of the things that I find impressive about it is that it does deal with such mature themes that, you wouldn't expect from, it's a Disney movie, so it's like for kids and stuff. It's like, yeah, I know, 20,000 Leagues, it's obsession and war and revenge and violence and destruction and trauma and Kirk Douglas whoring. So it's like, it's actually quite a mature film. And like all the great Disney movies, it has something for everybody in it. Kids can watch it and enjoy it, and adults can watch it and enjoy it, and different people will get different things out of it. And it's the same with, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the original one. Not gonna be the new one, that's for sure. Snow White and Mary Poppins Davy Crockett, all these movies have something in there for everyone, and they touch on so many different things that there's something that anyone can find in it to captivate them in some way. 2000 Leagues brought in spectacle. Yeah, it was a huge movie, right? Disney spared no expense in making this movie, trying to make a science fiction movie based on some author who was 100 years out of date, into a massive cinematic spectacle. Like, it's amazing he pulled it off, but that's the genius of Walt Disney himself, right? Not the company, but the man, Walt Disney. That he's able to even pull that off was incredible. Clearly, those lists are compiled by thick-witted dingbats. I agree. 20,000 Leagues does not get the respect it deserves. And it should be, again, on every top 50 sci-fi movies list. It should be on every top 50 Disney movies list. And that's even me being generous, saying it should be top 50. It should be on, like, the top 10 of either one. It's that good. But never does end up on there, sadly enough. Well, let's see, the giant squid. So exciting. Yeah, in fact, that was a clear case of Disney's genius as well, right? Because the original giant squid sequence, which is based on how it was in the book, it took place during sunset, like this calm sea, blood red sky, and then you have this giant squid attacking. In the book, it's actually a school of giant squids, which is just the one in the movie. But it looked ridiculous. If you've ever seen like the deleted scenes, it looks ridiculous. And Walt Disney came along, saw that, and was like, what are you doing? So he basically rewrote that scene so that it took place, at night in a storm. So as that the environmental excitement and danger. It's a dangerous environment at night during a storm, these massive waves tossing about, and then they have to fight a giant squid on top of that. And that made the scene. So that's a case where what works in a book doesn't necessarily work on screen, and that's why movies and film or movies and books are different media, and you have to do different things with them. You can't just do a one-to-one translation. H.G. Wells versus Jules Verne. Who wins? Well, I like Jules Verne, personally. I love his books. His books totally vibe with me as his absolute brilliance in being a romantic author, but contrary to the Romantics, he was able to see science as a vehicle for the transcendental appreciation of nature, and to see the man of science as the solitary romantic genius. Like, that's what 20,000 Leagues is, right? Captain Nemo is the solitary romantic genius, and the Nautilus becomes the scientific vehicle for the transcendental appreciation of nature. So Verne, totally get the vibe, totally love the vibe. And Verne as a person, I actually respect, and I thought it was interesting. And I have been to his grave in France and his old home and such. This was before I did YouTube videos, so I don't have footage of that. So if I ever go back, but Amiens is where he's buried, and that's not on the list anymore because I've been there once now. So next time we go to France, I want to go to Nantes because that's where he was born. So just follow his whole life around. So I actually respect and admire Verne as a person. Wells, not so much. I think H.G. Wells was a disgusting, petty, horrible little man. The one that really broke me on him was finding out how he forced his wife to settle an argument between two of his mistresses. It's like, what a shitbag. There goes my YouTube demonetization there. Like, what a dink. And I mean, great writer, sure. And I admit his stories are classics. War of the Worlds is a classic. Island of Dr. Moreau, Invisible Man, First Men in the Moon are all classics. Yes. Shape of Things to Come. where he, well, I mean, to his credit, he at least outlines that to get to his utopia, he has to kill all the religious people. So, I mean, there is that. At least he's honest. He's not relying on some just miraculous third world war to do it for him. So at least he says it. Doesn't mean I respect him though. um, so, um, no, and like his ideology in his books is just abysmal. Like he is anti-human. He's, um, like Verne's characters are so full of life, right? Like it's and ultimately they reaffirm these sort of like humanist values. I mean, Verne himself was a Catholic, fairly nominal towards the end of his life, but still Catholic enough that he was also very humanist, in the sense of like seeing human beings as individuals who had value and merit in the eyes of God and whatever. And so you get, the solitary romantic genius matters, and the human characters matter, right, in a Verne story, and they have life and they have character to them, and this view of life infuses his work as well. Whereas H.G. Wells, what's the name of the narrator? Rarely, if ever, says so, right? Because they don't matter. Because his books are just these violent, nihilistic orgies of destruction. Right? This War of the Worlds is just the wholesale destruction of humankind. And that does not jive with me. That does not gel with me as a way of looking at the world. So I don't particularly respect H.G. Wells. And well, what I think is actually more relevant is that it's really not a competition between Verne and Wells. Everybody puts them together, and you know, who is it? Wells versus Verne. And Wells wrote just at the tail end of Verne's life. Verne knew about him and made his comments about how Wells is not a proper scientific writer because he just makes things up, and says he has sort of a very pessimistic and English way of looking at the world. Was one of Verne's comments.
From a Frenchman?
From a Frenchman.
Oh my god.
I know. Wells' contemporaries um, were George Bernard Shaw, G.K. Chesterton, and Hilaire Belloc. Those were the guys who had they carried on this constant public debate among themselves, constantly writing letters and books and all sorts of stuff, referencing each other in this ongoing public debate. And Shaw and Wells were the two Fabian socialist types. So the extreme left wing, extreme progressive socialist Fabians. And so they hated each other, because as only, extreme left wing socialists can, is hate each other, right? Whereas Chesterton and Belloc were both Catholics. So they got on famously, and in fact, Shaw just gave them one name, Chester Belloc, because as far as he was concerned, they were practically interchangeable. And they actually had, Chester Belloc and Shaw had a fairly amicable relationship. You could see them sitting down for a beer together and talking, right? Whereas Wells, being a pathetic little, horrible little man, just hated everybody. So that's who the actual debate is between Wells, Shaw, Belloc, and Chesterton. And if you've never read G.K. Chesterton, read G.K. Chesterton. Chesterton is amazing. His two sort of bodies of work. He has the Father Brown stories. So they're the mystery stories of a crime-solving Catholic priest, and which are infused with his Catholic way of looking at the world, which is again this very humanistic way of looking at the world, which some people might balk at me saying that, how's a Catholic view of the world a humanistic view of the world? But it's the idea of grace and forgiveness and the divine dignity of every human life, which Wells does not have. And then there's Chesterton's religious writings and his philosophical writings. Um, and he did this one novel. His closest novel ever to a science fiction novel is The Ball and the Cross, which basically it's about these two characters. Um, one of them is this hardcore atheist who writes a newsletter, and the only person who ever replies to it is this Christian guy. And so they spend the entire novel trying to settle down to have a duel. And there's this framing sequence that is like the science fiction has this flying machine and everything. It's quite delightful because Chesterton is just a wonderful humorist writer. Um, but yeah, and if you ever want to understand, have a different perspective on Christianity than perhaps you've ever heard before, read his book Orthodoxy. It's a brilliant book. Um, as I've mentioned last stream, actually, is that I actually am a Christian myself. I try not to like push that on YouTube at all. Um, but I'm sure an astute person could guess that from some of my commentary on movies and things like that. But as far as theological writings go, G.K. Chesterton is great. I think he's probably by far the most interesting theological writer of the last 125 years. You're talking about time after time. Yeah. Right. They always have to put H.G. Wells in as the narrator because H.G. Wells never gives a name for a narrator because to him, human beings are not important. People prefer the fairy tale stuff from Disney than the science fiction stuff. Yeah, that is true, Martin. There's fans out there for Disney sci-fi stuff, but it's like they made 20,000 Leagues and then kind of quit. So there's little stuff. There's like the Moon Pilot, which is sort of like a weird little comedy satire movie. There's The Black Hole, which is 20,000 Leagues in Space, but not as good. There's Tron, which the legend of Tron is better than the movie Tron. Like Tron's iconic status, overshadows the weaknesses in the movie itself. But Tron's a nice attempt, and I love the Tron 2.0 video game is actually really good. That just had an anniversary like yesterday. Tron Legacy is I didn't think it was that great, but it's because it was rather undirected. Whereas Tron at least was very directed, if flawed, but at least it had like good coherent world building in it, which Tron Legacy did not. The Rocketeer, which is a great movie. And then you had Treasure Planet, which I love, which is a criminally underrated movie. Mm-hmm. Atlantis, The Lost Empire, also a criminally underrated movie. Lilo and Stitch is probably their most famous sci-fi movie at this point, because yes, Lilo and Stitch is sci-fi. And John Carter, which I thought was much better than anybody gave it credit for, and I think it is terrible that Disney threw it under the bus before its first weekend was even over. My take is, Douglas says here, my take is that Verne took the known science and theories of the time and asked what if and what could be next. We also have more a fantastic what if angle. Yeah. Well, as I was saying before, I don't know if you were here for that, Douglas. What I was saying before is that Verne, he's primarily writing adventure stories, right? So he has a romantic view of life. If you think about romanticism as the movement, romantic music, romantic painting, romantic poetry, romantic writing, that is the tradition Verne is from. And so he has this romantic view of the world, and he's expressing it through these adventure stories, like stories of these far-flung exotic locales and the wildlife and the nature, the landscapes, the people, and all these far-flung places. And his scientific inventions are means to get there. So the Nautilus is a machine he had to come up with based on existing submarine technology to get his characters into the ocean so they could go tour the ocean. That's its practical purpose. That's its narrative purpose. But then he also adds that extra oomph there and makes Captain Nemo this solitary romantic genius. And so it's not just a novel about fish, it's also a novel about humankind. And our relationship to each other and to the landscape, because he also has a romantic view of people as well, right? So Verne is a romantic, whereas Wells is a Fabian socialist nihilist. So he has this very denigrating view of humankind, this very cynical and nihilistic view of existence, which he expresses through things like War of the Worlds and Island of Dr. Moreau and things like that. Um, Verne would never let the world get destroyed because that is incoherent with Verne's view of the world, where everybody has dignity and value imparted by God. Whereas Wells is like, there is no God, so kill the planet, destroy the whole planet. That's the actual difference between them. It's not really about the technology. For Wells, the technology is not a vehicle to the transcendental appreciation of nature. The technology is just made up stuff so that he can expound on his socialist and sort of nihilistic ideas of humankind. Right? So, and in fact, by the end of his life, he largely disdained his scientific work, his scientific romances, his science fiction. He was like, it's kind of old, silly stuff I did when I was young. But toward later on in his life, he starts to do like very serious, like political treatises and histories and things like that. Shape of Things to Come is sort of like, it's not really as much like a science fiction novel in the sense of like Invisible Man or something, as it is like his political treatise on how he thinks the world should be run and how it should get there, which incidentally involves murdering every religious person, which he writes about in there. So that's the big difference between them. It's not really about the technology. It's how they use that technology to expound on their view of the world. And for Verne, it's a romantic vision of the world. For Wells, it's a cynical, nihilistic view of the world. Let's see. Also, I touch here. You guys are talking about time after time. War of the Worlds, always associated with the infamous radio broadcast. Yeah, and the thing is, like, I don't hate War of the Worlds. It's a good book. The radio drama is amazing. Decent movie. I kind of class it a bit like I class mentally. I class Matango, and I class um, Night of the Living Dead as movies that I disagree with philosophically, but are very good at what they do. Right, so when I'm sitting at the store and I have a giant TV at my store and I just play like old horror movies and stuff, and Night of the Living Dead and Matango and War of the Worlds will all pop up on there, just in the background sort of thing. They're not bad movies. It's not War of the Worlds is a great book. It's a great audio drama. It's a decent movie. It's just I disagree philosophically with the ultimate premise of sort of like cosmic nihilism. But yeah, and actually I have like the ultimate edition of War of the Worlds. It's the complete novel with the original illustrations and the complete script of the radio drama and a CD of the radio drama and a whole bunch of articles about like essays about the novel and the radio drama and everything. So I don't dislike it by any stretch of the imagination. I dislike Wells as a person, but the book is great and the radio drama is great. What are your favorite film adaptations of H.G. Wells? And do you think they are better than his books? Well, I think the two best Wells ones are the ones from this time period that we're talking about, right? So, First Men on the Moon and The Time Machine, I think, are the best adaptations of his work. I mean, the only even other one I can really think of, I mean, there's the Time Machine there with Jeremy Irons and Guy Pearce that exists. The only other film of oh no, wait, dumbass, Invisible Man, Universal Monsters. That would be the best Wells adaptation. Here's that one. Then I would say Time Machine, and then First Men on the Moon. Shape of Things to Come is, I mean, it's an art deco. The set design in it is great. Great art deco designs in it. but I don't like the story. I mean, the movie at least has the courtesy to gloss over the whole like committing genocide against religious people, which I take personally, at being a religious person, who is one generation removed from genocide. Um, so, glosses over that because it's still a Hollywood movie, right? But the movie itself is kind of boring. So, um, yeah. So I would say Invisible Man, 1933. And then Time Machine 1960, and then First Men in the Moon from 64 would be, I think, the best Wells adaptations. Science fiction as we know it today probably wouldn't exist without Jules Verne and H.G. Wells. Correct. What about Mary Shelley? Also correct. I know she only wrote one book, but she was brilliant. Frankenstein was one of my favorite books. Yeah, was Frankenstein one of the first science fiction stories? No, actually. Depending on how you count science fiction, it goes back like even a couple centuries before that. It depends how you determine what is science fiction. Um, so, I mean, if you count any story in which people go to another planet as like science fiction, then go back to like 1600s France and you get all of these stories that are social commentaries. Like Voltaire wrote Micromegas. Um, um, Guy with the big nose. Cyrano de Bergerac writes his own story about life on the moon. Um, there's that. Francis Bacon wrote a book. No, Bacon? Godwin. God, can't remember. Um, but The Man in the Moon, with an E at the end of moon, um, might be the first science fiction story, except like the guy gets carried to the moon on like this apparatus being carried by geese. Um, so, but to be fair, Cyrano de Bergerac, his story, he first tries to get to the moon by attaching bottles of dew to himself. Because as everyone knows, the dew rises in the morning, right? So you attach bottles of dew to yourself, then you rise with the dew. And he does that, but then he loses like some bottles, and he ends up landing in Quebec because the Earth rotates underneath him. And from Quebec, he builds a rocket that takes him to the moon. So that's going back to like again 1600s French literature, um, whereas like Frankenstein is early 1800s. So I actually published. If you go on Amazon and you look up science fiction of antebellum America. I'm gonna put it in the chat. Science fiction of antebellum America. That is an anthology that I published. I've actually put together 4 anthologies of Victorian science fiction. So there's science fiction of the Gilded Age, there's science fiction of antebellum America, there's science fiction of the British Empire, and science fiction of the gay 90s. And mainly I wrote them for myself, so I could get a hard copy of these stories. But science fiction of antebellum America is science fiction written in the United States that predates the Civil War. And so that's going back to like Washington Irving, is I think the oldest stuff in that anthology. But there's some pretty early stuff in there that predates even Frankenstein. And one story that was so outrageously racist that I had to not include it. Like I couldn't, in good conscience, put that in that book. It was just so unbelievably racist. Had to not do that. But if you go to Amazon, look that up. That is an anthology that I put together of again pre-Civil War, pre-American Civil War science fiction. Considering Frankenstein used galvanism and brings creature to life, I suppose so. Yeah, I mean, Frankenstein is science fiction. Frankenstein is also horror. Frankenstein is also gothic. Well, that's horror at the time, gothic, and it's also a romantic book as well. It's a lot of things because genres weren't like super clearly defined back then, right? There was no science fiction or horror as we know it, so it's sort of like there you go. Love the Rocketeer. Me too. Love John Carter. Too bad Disney almost did nothing to promote the film. Oh my god, don't get me started on John Carter. It's weird that John Carter never needed promotional tie-ins or merchandising or a good trailer. That too, or commercials, or a title that told you what it was about.
Mm-hmm.
Disney deal killed John Carter. Disney didn't think that need John Carter anymore. Yeah, they originally made John Carter to try and appeal to sort of the boys market that Star Wars did, and then they bought Star Wars, and then they subsequently ruined Star Wars. So there you go, because they bought Star Wars to appeal to boys, because Disney mostly appealed to girls with the princess movies. And then they bought Star Wars and turned it into all being all the Force is female, which is like, well, that rather defeats the point, because here's the thing. All right, now that I've just like, God, this Cory guy's being sexist. No, I'm not being sexist. There are different types of stories, and different types of stories appeal to different people. And it just so happens that there are certain types of stories that statistically tend to predominantly appeal to certain types of people. And so, like big dumb action movies tend to predominantly appeal to men, especially young men. And romantic comedies tend to predominantly appeal to women. And that's not like, oh, those are girl movies, those are boy movies. It's not like that. It's just that these happen to be statistically what these kind of stories tend to appeal to the most. Right? We used to get this a lot with like goth. Oh, goth is so many white people. Well, it's not my fault black people don't want to be goth. Like, it's not, like we didn't make it that way. It's just the way it is. Not as many, skinny, pale white people are into rap either. Like, it just is what it is, right? So, yes, it's not that like girls can't like Star Wars. Of course, girls can like Star Wars, and the best thing of Star Wars is if it's just well written. It's just the deliberate attempt to make it into something that appeals to women, with the idea because it's bad to appeal to men, was foolhardy on Disney's part, shall we say? And yeah, so there we go. Now this is like the most political I think I've gotten. I've tried to be rather diplomatic, but I think I just got off on a rant there.
I like the original Star Wars, and I'm a girl.
So my wife likes the original Star Wars, and she's a girl. So there you go. So again, it's not like you can't like it if you're a girl. It's just like, Disney took this thing specifically because it appealed to boys to try and get the boys market, and then they tried to make it into something that appealed to girls. And the boys dropped out, and the girls weren't interested because it was still written like Star Wars, kind of, but just a bad version of it. And there you go. They shot themselves in the foot. In the meantime, anyways, that also deprived us of the full John Carter trilogy that there should have been. Any thoughts on C.S. Lewis? Yes. Good stuff. Screwtape Letters is disturbingly hilarious. Kaiser Soze likes Narnia. Bit of lazy writing with War of the Worlds. Germ defeats the aliens. Actually, no, that's intelligent writing. I'll fight you on that one. Because the point of War of the Worlds is cosmic nihilism, right? So, these aliens come in, they destroy humankind. Humankind cannot fight them. That's that. That's all there is to that, right? So what is going to fight the aliens so that there can be a narrator and there can be a story? There can be a lesson learned in there somewhere. Well, it's the microbes, right? The bacteria, the germs, kill off the aliens, which itself is a thing, right? It's not superior firepower that does it. It's not technological know-how. It's not brains or brawn. It's just this random germ that happens to live on Earth that they had no resistance to. And there is a subtext in there about imperialism as well, and like, the British going to far-flung countries and doing basically what the Martians did to the British in War of the Worlds. But overall, the theme is this cosmic nihilism. So you can't have the Martians get beaten by people in a story like that, right? It has to be something stupid and weird and dumb and random like a germ. Because his point is that the universe is stupid and random and mean and horrible, and stuff like that happens, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. So no, the germ is the point in War of the Worlds. Well, I mean, aliens invading a planet of water, if they're allergic to water, is their own damn fault. Things to come is a bit preachy and seen today, yeah. There are threads of Christianity woven throughout George Pal's War of the Worlds, yeah. So that reveal and narration at the end made a lot of sense. Yeah, well, and they try and Christianize the story, which I say that with a lot of disdain for someone who is a Christian. I mean, I'm more like, keep the integrity of the story, right? I might not agree philosophically with the story, but keep the integrity of it. Except for Mary Poppins, because P.L. Travers was a horrible, horrible person. What are your thoughts on Steven Spielberg's adaptation of War of the Worlds? Did not see it, do not care to.
That's the one with Tom Cruise.
That's the one with Tom Cruise, yeah.
That's okay.
The gay 90s. Yeah, you're laughing, Kaiser. Gay 90s as in 1890s because they were happy. Not there's anything wrong with it. But what are your thoughts on the Island of Dr. Moreau and its film adaptations? Island of Dr. Moreau, best film adaptation is The Island of Lost Souls, Charles Laughton. Classic Hollywood era, golden age of Hollywood horror movie. Charles Laughton is amazing. He is like one of my favorite actors. Charles Laughton is amazing in everything that he's in. Even if he makes me want to punch him in it. As some movies where he plays an absolutely despicable person. But like, you know, his Old Dark House, Hunchback of Notre Dame is like his classic role. Captain Bligh, Mutiny on the Bounty, of course. So Charles Laughton, amazing, elevates the material. Bela Lugosi is the speaker of the law. In Island of Lost Souls, also great to see him in a movie, even if it's a relatively bit part. So that's the best adaptation of Island of Dr. Moreau, in my opinion. Island of Dr. Moreau, the book, is a bit like, kind of hits you over the head, with the symbolism in it. It's in that genre of like British stories where they really feel the need to hit you over the head with the symbolism. Like, yes, the lion is Jesus. Yes, Dr. Moreau, that's all religion. Okay, I get it. Sort of thing. It's really transparent, hit you over the head. And I mean, to me as a religious person, it's rather silly and superficial take on religion. And this is the thing, like, okay, I doubt anybody here is this sort of person. But if anybody who's watching this, okay, you know, you're an atheist, fine, fair enough, whatever. You don't believe, okay, whatever. But you like to debate it online, right? You come and, you know, you heard other atheists say some line and you think that's like the knockdown argument and it's really going to make religious people feel bad about themselves and you're going to tell them how dumb they are and whatever. First of all, it's only water in this cup, by the way. You getting me going tonight. You know, you're really going to tell off those religious people. You're really going to make them mad. You're confident that if you've typed in your killer argument full of your insults about our magical sky daddy, that we're just sitting there like, how could you say that? No, that is not what we're sitting there doing. We're sitting there like this. That's how we sit there and read that, right? Because we've heard it all before. We've heard those arguments before, right? And that's how I felt reading Island of Dr. Moreau, right? It's like, here we go. Like, okay, yeah, H.G. Wells doesn't approve of my religion, which he clearly doesn't understand, based on his straw man allegory for it, right? So, Island of Dr. Moreau, it's a fine mystery, a fine science fiction-y thing about vivisecting animals and turning them into some shambling attempt at humankind who can only be kept in place by the threat of eternal violence in the House of Pain. I get it, Herbert. Got the symbolism in there. Okay. But it's like tiresome, right? It's just like, okay, sure, yep, I sure feel bad about my beliefs. Okay, got it. So Island of Lost Souls is acceptable because it is a golden age of Hollywood movie from the same era as the Universal Monsters, with Charles Laughton in it and Bela Lugosi in it, so it works. So I can accept it on those grounds. Otherwise, whatever. And then, of course, the whole disaster, the Val Kilmer and Marlon Brando version. I mean, the story behind how that was made is more entertaining than the movie itself was. 96 adaptation, yeah. Did you ever see Star Crash? That was a Star Wars knockoff with a female protagonist. I have not seen Star Crash. I guess that's something to add to the list. I'll definitely take Stella Star over Rey from Star Wars any day. Now I have to see Star Crash. Nobody likes the Marlon Brando version of Dr. Moreau. Loved Aslan, great character. Aslan a very overpowered character. Well, I mean, Kaiser, to be fair, Aslan is Jesus. So he should be overpowered, right? Tilda Swinton was great as the witch in the first Narnia. Tilda Swinton is amazing because she has managed to make a pretty respectable career out of being an extremely strange looking person. And it totally works for her. God bless her. So my wife's laughing in the background here. Hey, if you got it, gotta use it, right? It's like Steve Buscemi, right? He's never a romantic lead. It's a character actor.
But they're both fantastic character actors.
Yes, and they're both fantastic character actors.
You don't go, oh, that's Tilda Swinton. You go, that's an awesome character. Oh, right, it's Tilda Swinton.
Oh, yeah. Dr. Moreau with Burt Lancaster. I've maybe seen that version. I can't remember. Yeah, but going back to Aslan, though, there's a line about Aslan that I love, which is, I have used it because I also, guys, you guys are really getting everything going tonight. It's not just that I'm a Christian, I'm also a lay minister. My master's degree is actually in theology. That I have used this line in many a sermon, in fact, that Aslan, he's not a nice lion, but he's a good lion. Talking about how he's good, but he's not tameable.
He's not a tame lion.
He's not a tame lion. He's a good lion, but he's not a tame lion. Yeah, like, that is correct. Christianity, as it should be lived, is a good religion, but not a tame religion. Which is also why, atheists out there who are watching, if you are all like, religion's just about like controlling the sheeple. No, it is not. Christianity has largely had a history of being an uncontrollable wreck. No, Christianity is not a tame religion. But anyways, Michael York was also in that same version of Dr. Moreau. Yes, he was. Yeah, so I may have seen it, but I do not remember it. So, I don't tend to watch a lot of movies from the 70s.
No.
It's a rather depressing time period, frankly, with terrible movies, cynical movies, so I tend to avoid it. Plus, I was born in 77, so, and I'm terrible and cynical, so there you go. There's the 70s. My wife's laughing. All right, what time is it? 9:32, which means I should really get going before a religious debate now starts in the chat here.
I have one more question.
Oh, Ashley has one more question. My wife.
What is the most historically beautiful, because we're talking about period movies, historically beautiful movie that just makes you feel like you're in the period from this genre?
So, my wife asked, what is the most beautiful movie that makes you feel like you're in the time period in this genre of atomic age science fiction, Victorian science fiction?
Because I get distracted by their clothes not being right. So.
Yes, my wife is a historical costumer, so she gets distracted by the costumes not being correct. Well, if you're looking for some semblance of accuracy, I would have to go with Around the World in 80 Days, which is not especially accurate for 1850s, but it's the most like realistic one. But if you're talking to me just about overall aesthetic beauty, then I would have to go with Karel Zeman's films. So, like Fabulous World of Jules Verne and Baron Munchausen, because visually stunning. And I will forgive a lot for a visually stunning movie. And I don't even have to forgive a lot because they're great movies. There's movies that are not that great that I like because of the visuals. Whereas these, I mean, you have to like the genre of romantic mid-century science fiction movies. that are from the Czech Republic. So, but as far as just the overall visuals, it would be Karel Zeman's films. But for like realism in the costuming and stuff like that, I guess Around the World in 80 Days.
Which one?
The 56 version.
56 one.
Yeah, with David Niven.
Thank you.
And Shirley MacLaine as the least convincing Indian woman.
I remember having very colorful costumes. That's all I remember.
Yeah. You were born the same year Star Wars came out? Cool. Yeah, except it makes me old now. So, I was born in December of 77, which makes me an old man now. But at least, I may be an old man now, but it means I got to grow up in the 80s. So, golden age of Transformers and G.I. Joe and all that fun stuff.
Gem!
My gem is excitement. Ooh, gem. Yep. So, at least I got to grow up in the 80s. So, that was the good part about being born in the late 70s. Oh, yes, 80 Days was gorgeous. Yeah. Had a lot of good films because of Vernon Wells. Yes, we have. Queen also says Around the World in 80 Days is a great choice. Thank you. Well, as I said, it is now 9:36, and I still got to finish packing for heading off tomorrow. My wife and I were going off to Glacier National Park in Montana, wearing our historical hiking costumes. So if you, she's going to show off her new skirt that she just made, her hiking skirt.
Whoa.
So I'm actually going to put this in the, because it is kind of relevant to what we're talking about, but on Instagram, I don't keep it up as much as I should, because it depends on when we go hiking. But if you look up Heritage Hikers on Instagram, that is our Instagram account, where we post our photos where we go hiking in historical costume. To sort of reclaim the golden age of travel in the national parks and so on. That's what I want to do, because I love a lot of old things in general. So golden age of Hollywood, golden age of travel, all that sort of stuff. So if you want to follow us on Instagram, that is that. And Doug was born in December 66. All right, well, I tip my hat to you as my elder. Knowing's half the battle. Yep. So, but we still have to do the whole, usual, what videos do I have coming up here? So, it's time for some previews. All right, so what is coming up here? Well, a lot of the videos from last time haven't been published yet. So, but this is a new one. I have my largest toy unboxing ever when I picked up the Spirit Halloween Mars Attacks life-size Martian animatronic. So I picked that up for my store, actually. And so I did an unboxing video and putting it together and a little bit of a review, mostly me just squealing about how awesome it is. So that one is going to be coming up on September 1st. Going to be posting it there. I'm not posting anything on this coming week, just because I'm going to be out of the country even. I'm going to be on vacation. So I am not publishing videos during that time. But yeah, that's September 1st is going to be that one, unboxing my Spirit Halloween Mars Attacks animatronics. After that, that Son of Kong That Could Have Been video is going to be coming out still. My Scientifically Determined My Favorite Showa Godzilla movies, that's coming out. And then one that I'm just in the editing process of right now is Why the Creature from the Black Lagoon is so great. So, finally getting around to doing my review of that one. I'm slowly working my way through the Universal Monster movies. So we've done The Mummy, Dracula, The Wolfman, so far, and next up is The Creature from the Black Lagoon. Huzzah! And then I guess what that leaves then is the next live stream as well. So what is the subject going to be? Well, do we actually have subjects anymore? Or are we just shooting the breeze about whatever? As you guys get me worked up into going off on rants about more and more stuff until eventually I become, God knows what, critical drinker or something like that. But the ostensible topic of the next live stream at the end of next month is going to be just atomic age sci-fi in general. So we talked specifically about the Victorian stuff this time, but we're just going to expand that out next time to talk more broadly about all of atomic age sci-fi, good, bad, and or ugly as well. Going from the sublime to the beautiful to the ridiculous and whatever. So, as usual, that one I will announce closer to the date when I actually set up the live stream. And yeah, it seems like Sunday night worked. I see most of the usual crew here, and I think I've seen a few other people that don't usually show up. So maybe we'll keep it on a Sunday. We'll see. Here, I'll do in your... I'm not going to try and do it in his accent, though. So I cannot do a convincing Scottish accent, so I'm not going to bother trying to do that one. I can do the French accent terribly, but I can almost do a Spanish accent, but I can't do Scottish, which is weird because I am part Scottish as well. But anyways, so that is what is going on. So thank you very much, everyone, for hanging out with me tonight here, and for joining me this month. Kaiser Sunday is good. All right, I will we'll probably do it on a Sunday again then. And I guess with that, go away now, I guess.
And now, folks, it's time to say goodnight. We sincerely appreciate your patronage and hope we've succeeded in bringing you an enjoyable evening of entertainment. Please drive home carefully and come back again soon. Good night.